Hey, what is up, guys? My name's Trevor. I'm the college associate pastor here at The Way. And so we're so glad that y'all are here tonight as we dive into a pretty difficult topic. But before we get there, I have some pretty big news in my life that I announced a couple weeks ago. But just so that y'all are aware, we found out that my wife is pregnant with our first child. And so, yeah, so I'm going to be a dad, and that's pretty crazy to think about. I remember back in, I guess, August, we went in and we had like the first sonogram, and just seeing the baby. It was only about 7 weeks old, I believe, at the time, and it's like a little being, but you see the heartbeat. You know, you see the heartbeat, and you see a few weeks later we saw little arms, and so just wild to know that March 10th we're going to get to meet our child. And so, of course, naturally, everybody's been asking, like, oh, do you think it's a boy or a girl? And honestly, like, I have no idea. My wife is pretty confident that it's a boy. I don't really know why, but I'm like, I don't know. And, like, I have really different emotions about one or the other, but just super excited either way. And we actually get to find out this Thursday if it's a boy or a girl. And so I'm just, like, ready for Thursday because I want to know. Because then, of course, when you find out the gender, you can start to do stuff like getting the baby room ready and all those fun things, and picking out stuff for people to buy for showers and those kinds of things. But a couple weeks ago, I was in what will be the baby's room, and I was in there measuring a couch to see if it would fit on a certain wall. And I was just kind of looking in the room, and as I was looking in the room, just thinking about how in about 5 months or 4 months that I'm going to be looking at a baby in a crib, and my baby, and I just like started to like well up in tears and like cry. And so I've just found that just in the last couple of months, I've already, I'm just so much more emotional. Like things just kind of make me, I'm just like a big weenie now. And so, but like I was driving, I think to church a couple weeks ago, and the country song from Carrie Underwood came on, like All American Girl. And it's like that part where it's like a big note, and she's like speaking for the guy, and he says like, honey, I want a girl. And like I just started bawling, and I was like, what am I doing right now? Like, is this what my life has come to? And so super excited. But part of being a dad and part of being a parent is, of course, you want to protect your kids from stuff. You want to look out for your kids. You want to make sure they don't get hurt physically. When you're playing outside in the front yard, you want to make sure they don't wander off into the street without checking for cars. You want to make sure that they're having good relationships with friends and not getting bullied or picked on. All these things that you want to protect your kid from. And for me, one of those things as they get older that I'm going to want to protect them from is something virtual. And that's this struggle that so many millions of people have with pornography. And that's where we're going tonight. We're talking about porn tonight, if you didn't know. And we didn't tell you because we know that some of you probably wouldn't come if you heard that we were talking about porn. And so, but that's one thing that, because I know what it did to my life, I want to keep my kid from that. And so right here, I just want to go ahead and acknowledge that, this is always a bit of an uncomfortable conversation or topic for many, and it's still kind of seen as one of those things that you don't talk about. Like some of you are like, oh, he said porn. Like you're already like kind of like, oh, we're really going there. And just so you know, to help with that, when we go into our community groups after the meal, you'll actually be splitting up guys and girls to make those conversations a little bit less uncomfortable. But when it comes to pornography, when it comes to that issue, the only way to fight it or to guard yourself from it or to deal with it is to address it, to talk about it. The only way to know how to handle it is to know about it, what it is, what it does to our lives. Like I want to guard my kids from it, but the only way that you can guard someone from something like as accessible as pornography is not by sheltering them. It's not by avoiding it. It's by informing about truth and what it is and what it does. And so I know for a fact that stats are on my side tonight that would say that there are many people in this room who are in an addictive and abusive relationship with pornography right now. Like you walked in here tonight with that. And that would have described me years and years ago. I was in that addiction. And God rescued me. God pulled me out of it. And I believe that tonight that God wants to rescue you if you will be honest with Him and bring it to Him tonight. And I believe that, if that applies to you, you know who you are. But here's the thing, even if it doesn't apply to you directly, I promise you there's someone in your life that you love that is dealing with that issue. And so tonight, I'm not going to just like tell you how bad porn is and then not offer you any real solutions. I'm not just going to sit up here and tell you how it's a sin, and of course it is, but we're going to do more than that. We're actually going to get practical. We're going to talk about some truths about it that we need to know. And then we're going to dive into some practical things. But with that being said, we got to ask the question, what does the Bible say about it? Does the Bible even address it? And so one thing that we know is that porn actually can be traced back all the way to AD 79. So this is actually during times when the New Testament was written. And obviously it wasn't virtual, but in the ruins of Pompeii, which is a huge city in Rome, they actually found massive paintings, sexual paintings, likely even placed in bedrooms and such to cause arousal. And so we know that forms of pornography actually did exist in biblical times. And that makes it really easy for us to make the claim that I'm going to make next. And so there's a word in the Bible that we see a lot, sexual immorality. We see that in Scripture about 80 times, actually, in the New Testament. And that comes from the Greek word porneia. That Greek word porneia, and that's where we get our modern term pornography from. But that word porneia, it means prostitution, whoredom, fornication, adultery, and sexual immorality. And so porneia is the distortion of anything sexual. And so over and over again in Scripture, we see the warnings and the dangers of sexual immorality, which directly applies to pornography. And so we know that the Bible does speak on that, maybe not directly in the word that we have in our English dictionary today, but it does teach against it through sexual immorality over and over again. Jesus tells us in Matthew 15:19 that sexual immorality, it comes from the heart. So Jesus talks about it, and he says it's a heart issue for us. And then in Acts 15, as the church is beginning, it's taught multiple times in Acts to abstain from sexual immorality. And then in 1 Corinthians 6, which will be in a little bit later, Paul actually tells us to flee from it. And so how do we flee from pornography? Well, we flee from it by being honest about it, by being informed about it. And so we're going to look at some stats and some facts real quick, because some people will have the question, like, is this really even that big of an issue? Especially in the church, like how many people actually struggle with it? Like, why a whole message on this? And so just a couple of quick stats. We know that in the church, people that claim to be Christian, 64% of Christian men admit to monthly use. 64% of people that proclaim Christianity, that maybe come to church on Sundays, would admit to monthly use, and then 15% of women. And that's just in the church. Outside of the church, we know that roughly 40 million Americans view porn monthly. 95% of teenage boys have been introduced to it by the age of 17, many of them becoming addicted. Many as young as 7 years old. I've actually met with many guys personally that were introduced to pornography. It's pretty common actually at about 7 or 8 years old. And so we can think about what that's doing to a young man's view on sexuality and intimacy and how they view women when they become 13, 14, 15-year-old young men, and now 18, 19, 20-year-olds in college. We can think about what that might do to someone. But then out of the church, just as a whole, we know that 79% of men watch porn monthly between the ages of 18 and 30. 79%. So 80% theoretically of the guys in this room. That's your age group, 18 to 30. And then 20 to 30% of women. And there's a lot of stats out there about women. It kind of varies, but from what I could find, it's about 20 to 30% of women at that age. And so it's safe to say that porn has consumed our culture in the Christian community, and obviously out of it, porn is a quiet killer. It's a close companion to many people and many homes all over the world, and it's robbing us of what God created sex and intimacy to be. It's been completely normalized. But just because something is normal doesn't mean that it's good or moral. Another crazy thing that I saw is that according to a survey from the American Academy of Lawyers, they found that porn at least partially contributed to more than 60% of divorces. So 60% of the divorces that you hear about, porn was a contributing factor in the end of that marriage and the breaking up of that family. Can you imagine losing a family, losing a relationship with your wife and potentially your kids or your husband because of some fake, meaningless, empty, digital, virtual pleasure? Like that's the country, that's the world that we live in. And this happens to because we've been lied to. We've been lied to that it's normal. We see it basically on TV nowadays, on movies and shows that come out on Netflix. It's literally all over the place. Sex has become so normalized and just dirtied down to just like this activity and this objectifying thing. But the reality is that if you desire a real intimacy with a person and you desire to have a good marriage, and you desire to have a healthy view of sexuality, the facts would show that porn addiction is extremely harmful to those things. And so we know that porn is a massive issue, and that's why we are talking about it tonight. And of course, if you want to defeat something in your life, the best way to do that is to study how it operates and then systematically take it down. And to make a lighter reference, it's like what LeBron and the Lakers are doing to the Heat right now. Like the Heat are 2-0. They're probably going to be 3-0 after tonight because the Lakers prepared, and now they're destroying the Heat. They studied and they prepared. They find out how they operate, what they do, and now they're defeating them. And that's what we want to do with pornography. And so I want to go through 3 big truths, 3 main things that porn affects. And the first of those things is going to be that porn affects the brain. Porn affects the brain. It's been shown in a study at Columbia University and many other places as well that porn actually has a more powerful and a more lasting impact on the brain than even real sex. So real sex affects the brain less than porn does. And then eventually they have shown that porn can actually cause the brain to eventually not have any kind of natural desire or craving for real sex, but only an encounter with images or videos on a screen. And so they found that porn eventually replaces real sex in the brain for a lot of people. Like your brain actually makes that change chemically. And so when most people watch porn, the brain goes into what scientists call a flow state. And it's like if you're an athlete and you see a guy who, like Steph Curry, when he was, when the Warriors were kind of in their prime, and he would just like go on a night where he would just literally, it seemed like everything that guy threw up was going down. Like he was making every shot. Even if you don't know what I'm talking about, you know what a shot is in basketball. Like it was like this guy could not miss. And athletes are like, man, I was in the zone, man. Like and that's the flow state. That's an actual thing happening in the brain where basically it's like your brain is at an elevated state. It's like even the dumbest person could be the smartest person when they're in the flow state. And so what happens when you're watching porn is that your brain becomes hyper-focused on whatever the task is. And so let's take porn, for example. When someone watches porn, they're typically alone, completely zoned out, and highly alert and intensely staring at a screen. And so this amplifies and increases your brain's ability to remember and take hold of what you're watching. And many people that are addicted to porn would say that it seems like they just can't get these images out of their mind. And it's because when you're in the flow state, your memories are actually typically will last a lifetime. Those images are seared in your brain. Unlike if you just watched a movie and then you didn't watch that movie for 20 years, you're probably not going to remember much about that movie. And so that's why porn is such a massive issue, because getting this stuff to just go away, it doesn't happen that easily. Another way that porn affects the brain is that over time, as the brain encounters continuous arousal by porn week after week or month after month or day after day, the brain actually begins to rewire itself to make you crave porn. So actually, they have found that the effect that porn, the addictiveness of porn that happens in the brain is the same as a drug addiction. That the chemical change that happens in the brain is literally the exact same as the chemical change that happens when someone's addicted to, let's say, cocaine or heroin. So studies have found that porn creates these massive dopamine dumps, just like drugs do. And then the more you're exposed to it, you become numb to it, and it's never enough. And you keep having these massive dopamine dumps, and it's never enough. And so you always crave more. And that's why porn addiction, it really is a extremely difficult addiction to overcome. Your brain is literally creating new pathways. It's called neuroplasticity or some fancy science term like that. But your brain is basically creating new pathways to basically cause you to crave and feel like your body actually needs pornography. And this is why porn is also linked heavily to depression, to anxiety, to increased stress, to social problems, because you're living on these dopamine dumps. And so porn, it actually literally, it changes everything about your brain. It makes your brain unhealthy in a lot of ways. And now if you're hearing this and it's kind of causing you to freak out and you're like, okay, so what does this mean for me? Just know that the same way that the brain can create new pathways, you can also replace those pathways with something new. And those pathways, when not used, eventually they do go away because your brain is operating at such a high level. Our human brain's pretty incredible. And so if you stop reinforcing those pathways, they'll eventually disappear. And so you can become unaddicted to pornography. It is possible. I'm a walking example of it. You're coming on up on like 8 years free. And so I'm telling you, like, it is possible to get free, but it does have very serious effects on the brain. And that's why when you're trapped in it, it feels so impossible, because it is a massive addiction. It's not just this thing that you can just stop whenever you want. The next thing that porn affects is that porn affects your heart. It affects your heart, it affects your brain, but it also affects your heart. Watching porn and being addicted to porn is basically like giving your heart to something without a pulse. You're giving yourself over to something that puts you in your most vulnerable state, but yet it doesn't have the ability to care about you. It doesn't see you. It only takes from you. It harms you. You're dependent on it. It doesn't value you or have the ability to make you feel valued. The only goal of pornography is to lure you in, drain your mind, body, and soul, leave you empty so it can profit on revenue, ad revenue, and subscriptions. It's not good for your heart. It's like giving your heart over to something without a pulse. That's not good for us. Emotionally, spiritually, it's not good for us. Porn does not care about you, and it cannot give us what we really desire. And within this idea that porn affects your heart, I want to make the point that pornography gradually lets you kill you. Porn lets you kill you. And 1 Corinthians 6:18, Paul's writing to the church in Rome, and this church was struggling a lot with all kinds of sexual immorality. And Paul says this, he says, "Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits outside of the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body." And so Paul is saying that sexual sin, it's hurting you. It's actually hurting you. It's killing you emotionally and spiritually. Porn is just temporary fulfillment that leads to a life in change. That's all it is. It's an addiction that slowly consumes you and numbs you and it eats away on you on the inside. And it puts you in this place that you don't want to be. And if you're in that place right now, you know what I'm talking about. The way that it impacts your soul, the way that it impacts you spiritually, the way that it impacts the way that you see people. And I will say this, for me, in high school, when I was in my deepest addiction to porn, that was the furthest from God that I've ever felt. In my deepest places with pornography, it was the furthest from God that I've ever felt. The way that it was affecting my heart and the way that it was killing me from the inside out cannot be understated. And just before that, in 1 Corinthians 6, Paul says in 15 and 16, he says, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two will become one flesh." And so what's happening there, the way that relates to pornography, is that porn addicts are becoming one with a screen. Members of a screen. It gradually eats away your heart from the inside out, and your heart towards people and your heart towards God, they begin to change. And what porn is, the reality of what pornography is that it's modern prostitution. That's all it is. It's selling sex. That's what porn is, modern day prostitution. It's sex being sold. And it does affect us that deeply. Now, some factual ways that they have seen the way that porn affects the heart and the way that you view other people. There was a survey in 2012 from about 1,500 porn-addicted males. So 1,500 guys that were addicted to porn, and 56% admitted that their taste in porn as they watched more became increasingly extreme, hardcore, aggressive, and controlling. And that's just the 56% that admitted that change was happening within them. And what this causes for some people is for those same people, as they begin to view intimacy the same way that that same way with a real person. And so that extreme, hardcore, aggressive, controlling that we see, it's all over the porn industry, that actually is going to eventually affect how they view a real person, or maybe a real spouse or a future wife if they don't already have one. And so you got to ask yourself in your heart, like, do I want porn affecting and determining how I view my future spouse? And that goes for guys or girls. Do I want something fake determining how I view someone real? And nowadays, like, so many males and even some women get addicted to porn long before they have any sort of real relationship with the opposite sex. And so porn is actually what has taught them about sexuality. And the thing is that porn is usually filled with acting, cheating, adultery, aggression, unrealistic time frames and experiences, unrealistic bodies, abuse, and many other things. So by the time a person is ready for a real relationship with the person, and maybe they even get married and they've never done anything about this addiction, their idea of intimacy and what real sex is has actually been shaped by porn. And this causes them to never be satisfied with real intimacy, and they don't desire their partner because their partner doesn't give them what the screen did. And studies show that this eventually leads to less sex, less connection with a real person, and eventually no intimacy and no sex at all. That's what porn does to your heart. That's what porn can do to someone you love if you don't address it now. And so you got to ask yourself, do I want my heart towards my future spouse or even my current girlfriend or boyfriend to be shaped and twisted by porn? Do I want them to feel like they're not enough, like they're unworthy because of my porn problem? And I believe the answer for everyone to that question is no. Don't let that continue to damage your heart and your ability to love well in the future. I'm asking you, I'm begging you tonight, would you do something about it if this describes you? Would you get honest with yourself and with God tonight? And the third thing that porn affects is that porn affects the world around us and the people around us. Because you got to think, if the private act of viewing porn can rewire your brain, devastate real relationships, destroy a family, what happens when you multiply that act by hundreds of millions of people worldwide? In 2015, this is mind-blowing. In 2015, it was determined from a single website that 4.3 billion hours of porn was consumed from one website. That's 500,000 years worth of porn in 1 year. And that's from one website. And there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of those websites. 500,000 years of porn watched in 1 year. Can you imagine how that must be affecting our world? How it must be affecting our society? And you got to ask, like, what are the consequences of that? When it's been shown that porn addiction increases marital infidelity by over 300%. When it's been shown that 88% of porn available depicts aggression and violence, the way that is affecting our humanity, it cannot be understated. How is that affecting our world now that we know for sure that major porn sites, ones that we've all heard of, have been linked to abuse on sets, to child pornography, and the human trafficking industry? That's a fact. That major porn sites have been directly connected to human trafficking and child pornography. 100% true. I think it's safe to say that porn is having very negative effects on humanity, and that's just the reality. There's a website, humantraffickingresearch.org, and they found that 80% of survivors, that people that were pulled out of the human trafficking industry, reported that they were trained with pornography on what trafficking customers would want. Many survivors said that they were forced into filming and that their videos are still on popular porn sites today for the world to see. And so the reality is that when you go and you click on a website, you really don't know what you're looking at, where it came from, or the situation surrounding that video. That's just the reality of it. And if you want more information about that, there's an organization called Exodus Cry that you can look into, and they're actually trying to take down one of the biggest porn sites in the world. Major sites that most people go to watch have zero monitoring, zero filtering. That's just the reality of it. And so porn, it's harming our world. It's harming humanity, not just you. It hurts you, but it does hurt the world around you as well. And so we know that porn affects the world around us in very dark ways, but also watching porn, it doesn't just affect you as a person, it can affect people in your life. And we talked about it could be your future wife or husband. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard guys say, oh, I mean, yeah, like when I get married, like that's it, no more. And it's kind of like, man, that's a dangerous game to play. Like that's a massive gamble on your future marriage, don't you think? Like when you hear everything that we've talked about tonight, in light of that, don't you think it's a pretty massive gamble to go, oh yeah, when we get married, like I'll stop? And the first question I always ask is why? Why do you think that you'll be able to stop that easily? Because I hate to break it to you guys, but when you get married, you don't have sex every day. And I hate to break it to y'all. In reality, like healthy marital couples, they say they have sex about maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And so what happens when you're married and the baby comes? And then after the baby comes, you can't have sex for 6 to 8 weeks. Are you going to turn back to that addiction that you never manned up and handled? Is that really what you want to, is that the game that you want to play? Because I've met with a lot of guys and they're willing to gamble that. And man, I'm just telling you, it's not worth it. That gamble is not worth it. You don't want to bring that into your marriage. Again, 60% of divorces listed as a contributing cause. Do not be a statistic. And then also, we know that it can affect your boyfriend or your girlfriend that you're currently dating. And I just want to say this, and I know it's going to step on some toes, but if you're dating someone and you're addicted to porn, you need to address and handle your addiction like literally tonight. Or otherwise, you need to break up with that person. And you need to let that person know that you're dating, hey, I have this, I want to work on it, I want to get better, I want to get rid of this addiction, I want to fight against it. But if you can't do that, you have to break up. But I believe that you can get free and find healing in Christ without necessarily having to break up. But you got to start now. You got to be willing. And I know people that were dating, and they got very, very serious about handling their addiction. Eventually, they went on to get married. But if the guy or the girl that you're dating is unwilling, then it's time to break up. That person does not deserve to be with you if they're unwilling to do anything about that. He or she is basically cheating on you every single day or every week. And so at this moment, if that person's unwilling to fight to get free and take practical steps that we're about to talk about, then what that tells you is that he or she does not value you or your future marriage. And if you're that guy or that girl, I'm telling you, like, I love you, and I want to help you, and I want to point you to freedom in Christ. I'm just asking that you would be willing. But if you're not willing, I have to recommend that person would break up with you, because they do not have to stay with you in that circumstance. And some of you might ask the question, like, if you're single and you're addicted to porn, should you date? And I would say no. If you're single and you're not dating yet and you have that addiction, do not start dating until that is handled. And if you're considering dating somebody and you find out that that's the case, do not start dating them. I know that they're attractive, but you'll find someone else, I promise. The next point tonight that is important to know is that complete freedom is possible. Complete freedom is possible. John 8:31-36, it says, "So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, 'If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know truth, and the truth will set you free.' And they answered him, 'We are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free?' And Jesus answered them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son remains forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.'" And so when Jesus says that he's going to set you free, he didn't say partial freedom. He didn't say that you would be a slave to that sin sometimes, but sometimes not. Off and on, he said, if you know me, you know freedom. And I believe that applies to freedom from pornography. I'm not saying that it's not going to be an uphill battle, that it's not going to be a struggle. But what I am saying is that in Jesus, you do have freedom. And when Jesus talks about freedom, he's not playing. He's talking about 100% freedom. And that is possible tonight. But maybe like some of you at a point, I didn't believe that was possible. That was a lie that I believed. That true, complete freedom was not possible. And I thought, man, I'm just going to carry this with me forever. I'm going to carry this into my marriage, and that's just, it is what it is. But this is a common misconception, that you can't find complete freedom from this. I've met with so many guys who've shared with me that, man, I don't know how to get free. Is it really possible? And girls with the same story as well that have met with some of the females on our staff. And I mean, for me, these kind of meetings happen almost weekly. And I meet with guys weekly, almost without fail, about this issue. And they think, I don't know, is true freedom possible? And then we start to talk through practical steps. And I'm like, man, it is. Like, if it's not, I don't know what I am, because I'm completely free from it. And so, but it's such a powerful addiction that many of them have become defeated in their own mind, just like I was as a 16, 17-year-old kid. But the truth is that there is complete freedom available from it. It is possible. I am a walking example, and I know many other guys with that same story. But just like you, I would hear things like, once an addict, always an addict. Or, even related to, alcohol, like, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, like things like that. And man, like that is undermining the freedom that Jesus gives us. I'm telling you, like, I know that it sounds insane when you're in that dark pit of addiction, but I'm telling you, it's true. Complete freedom is possible tonight. It really is. And I want to begin to close tonight. I told you, like, I'm not going to just come up here and tell you how bad it is, all these things, and then not offer you practical steps that you can take. And so I want to begin to close by talking about exactly what I did and some of the things that I still do to stay free. And so these are steps that you can begin to take tonight to get free from this thing that is stealing your life and harming your future. And maybe you're in here and maybe it's not something that's in your life right now, but some of these things could be a preventative for you. And so the final thing tonight is that practical steps to get free are available. And the first step, step one, and if you are struggling with this, and maybe you don't want to write it down because you're like, people are going to think that that's me, this is available online. You can watch it again, or you can talk to me afterwards. But step one, accept the truth about what porn is doing to your life. View porn for what it really is, and realize the effect that it's been having on your life. Please don't ignore what we've talked about tonight. If this is you, if this has been plaguing your life, man, would you receive what we've been talking about tonight? Because I believe that God brought you in here for a reason. If you came in here tonight and you were trapped in this guilt and this shame, and you had no idea that we were talking about this, that wasn't by mistake. So one, accept it for what it is, and then step two, it's bring it to the light. And what I mean by that is confess it to God, and then confess it to a peer that you trust to fight this with you. And if you're a guy, man, like I will be that person for you. And if you're a girl, I will get you paired with another female tonight. Bring it to the light. That's step two. You got to own it, and you got to bring it forward at some point. You are not meant to fight this alone. You're just not. Too many people struggle with it for you to fight this alone. Step three, and this is a massive one. And it's one of the steps that we can literally take tonight. It's a big one. Address the places where you have access to it, and then cut off the access. So usually that's a phone or a computer or a tablet. Man, I'm telling you, like, for some of you in the room tonight, like, your phone is literally might as well be the devil because of what it's doing to your life. I meet with guys weekly, and we talk about it. I'm like, man, give me your phone. Like, I will set something up right now. If you have an iPhone, there's a thing on there called screen time, and it'll limit adult content. You can begin to block that immediately on your phone. If you have an Android, you can download a software called Covenant Eyes on your phone. If you have a computer, on my computer right here, I've been free for 8 years, and I still have a software on my computer called Covenant Eyes. And what it does is I have a couple of accountability partners in my life, and they get weekly reports for me to make sure that I'm doing okay. So I have practical accountability set up. And imagine if you didn't address access to it, and you just kind of let it be. It'd be like, we talked about alcohol last week. It'd be like an alcoholic who's like, man, I need to quit drinking. And then like you go in their cabinet and they've got like 5 of their favorite whiskeys in the cabinet. It's like, man, get those out of your house, dude. Like, don't allow yourself to have access to those things. And that's part of step 4 is to set up an accountability system. Have a friend that gets those accountability reports. Have a friend that checks in on you. Maybe you need to be checked in on daily for a little bit. maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, whatever it is, have an accountability system set up. And ideally, this is someone who's following after Jesus, someone who's free from this struggle so they can fight alongside of you and help you walk in the freedom that they already have and that you can have too. And if you're not sure of anyone in your life that this could be, like, I want to just tell you guys that we have 60 student leaders on leadership here at The Way. And if you're a guy, I will get you paired with a guy tonight. And if you're a girl, I will get you paired with a girl tonight. If this is your struggle, I'm telling you, like, we have steps that you can literally take tonight before you walk out the doors. We can start putting some of these things into practice. We all need accountability when it comes to really any kind of sexual sin. And then step 5, and this is the most important, and it can't be understated, that within all of these steps, you've got to be seeking Christ. None of this even matters without Jesus. This entire message, this entire talk tonight literally is completely irrelevant without Jesus. Because here's the deal, when you're alone, the only thing that can strengthen you and give you the ability to resist temptation is the power of Jesus. And when you are in this place where you're trying to step out of this and maybe you're taking these steps, but you have all these scars and these wounds, like, Jesus is the one that can heal those scars and those wounds, I'm telling you. For me, I took some of these steps, but I didn't really let Jesus into it, and it took a while. But when I said, okay, Jesus, you can have my shame, you can have my guilt, I need you to heal these wounds that I can't heal, that a friend can't heal. I'm telling you, within all of these, if you're not seeking Jesus, if you're not willing to bring it to God, man, it's going to keep getting to you. Jesus is the one that sets us free. Jesus is the one that heals us. Jesus is the one that pulls us out of darkness. The same Jesus that calmed the wind and the waves, the same Jesus that healed the blind man, the same Jesus that healed the leper, the same Jesus that has done all the things that he's done in your life. Maybe you haven't even realized it. That's the Jesus that will set you free from this struggle tonight. And then whatever else that you walked in here with. Jesus is the answer you've been looking for, the fulfillment that you've been searching for. The empty hole you've been trying to figure out what to fill it with, it's Jesus. The wounds in your life, Jesus can heal them. But you got to bring it to him tonight. Complete freedom, it is possible. Jesus died on the cross for you because he loved you. He died on the cross for all sin. He died on the cross for you to walk in freedom. And you can do that tonight if you will bring this to him.